After we saw, well, this is possible, we decided, well, let's go and explore, the human past in the world. How did we become who we are today?
They were the painted warriors who defied the legions of Rome, the masters of a land the empire could never tame. They carved their story into stone with symbols we still cannot read, and then, as if swallowed by the mists of their own homeland, they vanished. For over 1,000 years, they have been a ghost haunting the very foundations of Scotland, the Picts. Historians called their disappearance one of Britain's greatest unsolved mysteries. Were they wiped out in a forgotten war? Did they flee their lands, their culture erased? Or was the truth something far more complex? For centuries, the question echoed in silence, until now. Cutting-edge science has finally unlocked an answer, hidden not in crumbling texts, but in the very bones of the Picts themselves. What it revealed has forced a radical rethinking of an entire nation's origin. This is not just another chapter in history, this is a revelation that changes the story. History first meets the people we call the Picts through the eyes of their enemies. To the Roman Empire, the wild, cold north of Britain was the edge of the known world. Roman chroniclers, writing from the relative safety of their forts, spoke of the Picti, the painted ones. They described fearsome men and women, their bodies covered in tattoos or war paint, who fought with a ferocity that stunned the disciplined legions. This image, whether truth or propaganda, stuck. The Picts were branded forever as the untamed people of the north. In the late 1st century, the Roman governor Agricola marched north, determined to bring all of Britain under imperial rule. At a battle known as Mons Gropius, the Roman historian Tacitus claimed a decisive victory, but it was a victory on paper only. Rome could not hold the land. The northern tribes accomplished what few others could. They denied the empire total conquest. A generation later, Hadrian's Wall was built, a monument not to Rome's power, but to its limits. Beyond it lay the land of the Picts. For the next 300 years, they were a constant thorn in the empire's side, masters of guerrilla warfare who could strike from the mists and vanish without a trace. They didn't just resist Rome, they outlasted it. But as the Roman legions withdrew and their empire crumbled, the Picts stepped out of the shadows. They did not leave a written history, but they left something far more enduring. Scattered across the Scottish landscape, these monuments are the only voice the Picts left behind. They are a library of symbols, a code that has baffled experts for generations. Archaeologists classify them into 3 phases. The earliest are raw boulders, incised with cryptic designs, the double disc and Z-rod, the crescent and V-rod, and the strange dolphin-like creature known as the Pictish beast, which has no parallel in nature. What did they mean? Some scholars believe they were a form of heraldry, announcing the lineage of a powerful clan. Others argue they formed a complex symbolic language, communicating concepts of power, marriage, or sacred rites. A 21st century statistical analysis even found that the patterns of the symbols shared structural properties with written languages, fueling the theory that we are looking at a lost form of writing. What makes the puzzle so profound is their consistency. The same symbols appear on stones hundreds of miles apart, proof of a shared, sophisticated system. These were not random doodles. They were public declarations, carved into the landscape for all to see and understand. Then, as Christianity spread, the symbols began to merge with the cross, old and new worlds colliding on a single slab of stone. And then they stop. Around the 9th century, the symbols vanish, replaced entirely by Christian imagery. The language, whatever it was, fell silent. That silence coincides with an even greater mystery. At the very same time their art transformed, the Picts themselves disappear from the pages of history. The 9th century was an age of chaos. Viking raids hammered the coasts of Britain, shattering old alliances and forging new ones. Squeezed between the Norse invaders from the sea and the growing power of the Gaelic kingdom of Dal Riata to the west, the Pictish kingdoms were under immense pressure. The chronicles of the era list Pictish kings up to the middle of the 9th century, but then a new name emerges: Kenneth MacAlpin. Tradition calls him the first king of Scots, the man who, around the year 843, united the Picts and the Gaels to create a new kingdom, Alba, the kingdom that would one day become Scotland. And with the birth of Alba, the word Pict vanishes from the record. How could a people who resisted Rome and built powerful kingdoms simply dissolve? For centuries, this question fueled dark speculation. One popular theory suggested a genocide, that Kenneth MacAlpin conquered and annihilated the Pictish leadership. Another proposed a complete cultural takeover, where the Pictish language and identity were systematically erased by the Gaels. Their language left no living descendants. Their unique art disappeared. It looked like cultural extinction on a scale rarely seen in Europe. The Picts, it seemed, had been written out of their own story. For 1,000 years, that was the accepted narrative, a tragic, unsolved case. But the final clue to this mystery wasn't in a king list or a battle record. It was waiting, quietly, in their graves. In 2023, a landmark study changed everything. A team of scientists from across Europe succeeded in sequencing the first genomes from individuals buried in Pictish cemeteries. For the first time, we could read the story written in their DNA. The results were astonishing. First, the study addressed the question of their origin. Were the Picts mysterious invaders from afar? The answer was a resounding no. Their DNA showed clear genetic continuity with the local Iron Age populations of Britain. They were not outsiders. They were, in every sense, indigenous to the land they defended. Second, the evidence challenged one of the most famous theories about Pictish society, that they practiced matrilineal succession, passing kingship through the female line. It was a fascinating idea that made them unique in Europe. But the DNA from Pictish cemeteries showed no evidence to support this strict system. Kinship was more complex, forcing a complete reevaluation of how their society was structured. But the most profound revelation was about their fate. The scientists compared the ancient Pictish DNA to modern populations. They found no evidence of a population replacement or genocide. Instead, they found that the Pictish genetic signature flowed directly into the populations of the new kingdom of Alba, and it remains a fundamental component of the DNA of Scottish people today. The Picts were never wiped out. They were never replaced. They simply became the Scots. The disappearance from the historical record was not a physical vanishing act, but a political and cultural rebranding. When the Kingdom of Alba was formed, a new national identity was forged, and the old labels of Pict and Gael eventually became obsolete. They didn't vanish into the mists. They walked out of them and into a new future, forming the bedrock of a new nation.
The DNA evidence didn't close the book on the Picts. It opened a new one. The puzzle of what happened to them is solved, but this solution makes the remaining mysteries even more compelling. Knowing they are the ancestors of modern Scotland, we can now see their achievements in a new light. Archaeological sites like Tapo Nath, once thought to be a simple hill fort, are now being understood as massive, proto-urban settlements housing thousands of people. These were not scattered tribes. They were the architects of a sophisticated society, trading with continental Europe and building centers of power that laid the groundwork for the cities to come. The great enigma of the stones remains. Now that we know the people, the question of what their symbols meant how they saw their world, their gods, and themselves become sharper, more personal. The Picts are no longer a lost people, but a founding pillar of a nation. Their story is a powerful reminder that history is not always written in ink. Sometimes the most profound truths lie hidden, encoded in stone and bone, waiting for us to finally learn how to read them. Their silence in the records was never the end of their story. It was just a pause before science gave them back their voice.